Comfort is the avoiding of pain and the seeking of pleasure in a way where you sacrifice today, you sacrifice your future for the surety of today.
You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. And now without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hey there, welcome back to the No Labels, No Limits podcast. Today's guest, Rick Walker, is a founder, investor, strategist, and the author of the forthcoming book, 9 Steps to Build a Life of Meaning, How to Unlock Your Mind, Happiness, Power, and Your Enemies Demise. I love the whole title. Rick brings a unique perspective, and it's drawn from his experience scaling a 2,000 plus member international nonprofit, building a 400 employee business by age of 26, and advising leaders from Congress to the C-suite. He's chaired a $150 million charitable foundation, hosted a national talk show, and now leads a private equity firm formed with 11 wealthy families. So in this episode, actually we could go into all of those in separate episodes and have a great time. But in this episode, I really want to ask Rick to share with us so we can dive into the life-changing lessons and the strategies that he has found and cultivated over the years, which ultimately led to his book, which will be coming out, if it has not already, by the time this podcast airs, July 5th. So with that, let's formally welcome Rick to the podcast. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I've been looking forward to this, and I wanted to start with kind of a broader question, which is what catalyzed your journey from building empires to building meaning?
Wow, what a great question. The idea that wisdom is something that looks further out than is something more proximate really began to strike me when I was in my early 20s. In fact, I believe that the wisest mind looks into the most distant future for the most value reward that it can purchase with the currency of the present. And all that I have is the currency of the present, the now, the today. All I have is a promise and the hope for tomorrow, and yesterday's already gone. And so I've got to do whatever I can today. And so many of the things that you mentioned, growing my first company from 0 to 400 employees by the time I was 26, selling an international organization into 50 plus countries, selling another business that I started into 6 states. All of these things primarily happened at the same time. They were all happening sort of in my 20s and my early 30s, because at some point you have to realize either you're going to live today or you're not going to live at all. And so I think just that urgency was something that really struck me from a very, very early age. We grew up very poor. We grew up in a 2-bedroom house. My dad was out of work quite a bit. And so we had to go, we wanted something to eat. We had to go kill it, or we had to go, earn it, mowing lawns or whatever it might be. And so there was always this sort of hunger, this sort of drive within me that has really pervaded every element of what I've tried to do over the last really 25 years of work.
So that drive that you grew up, that was kind of lit in your youth, from that experience you just shared. Do you think that it's prevalent today? I'm just trying to think about when you don't have that, when you don't have some sort of thing that makes you hunger for more, do you think we lose our drive?
Yeah. Many of us, myself included, it begins by running away from something we know we don't want. Like I knew I did not want to be unemployed and having to struggle for money all the time. I knew that. And so maybe the first decade or so was predicated on that pursuit of something other than this, pursuit of the inverse of this. And then sometime around my 30th birthday, I began to get a glimmer of what I wanted to do, wanted to think about and help people other than myself. And so that began to propel me in a more positive fashion. And I think either of those two things works. And this is a little bit what we get wrong sometimes, because some of these men, I think about a lot of the women in the audience that, either you're a man or you're probably a woman that loves a man somewhere along your life, whether a father, a husband, a son, a nephew. And we often think that they've got to have a dream. They have to have a vision of where they want to go, what they want to do. But a lot of men in their 20s and 30s today don't have that. So we've got to figure out a way to get them to move. We have to be able to impute some energy into them. And one of the ways we can do that is by showing them what they don't want, and just get them to move a little bit. Because the problem is not potential. The problem is energy, from my perspective. This is what I've seen, and this is what I articulate in a lot of my work.
So say a little bit more about that. And I'm actually picturing all the men in my life, from my husband down to our grandkids, who are half of which are men, and in their teens and early 20s. So I'm actually picturing all these different guys and wondering how you create that energy for movement. Like, give me an example of how you might do that.
Yes. So Dr. John Vervaeke, the psychologist and I think he's the professor of Buddhist philosophy out of University of Toronto, who actually gave a really great quote for my book, has written in depth about the meaning crisis, this sort of 25 to 45-year-old age range. Maybe it goes down to 18, maybe it goes up to 50, of men that don't know what they want in life, and so they just sort of meander. This could look at a number of different ways. It may be the young man who maybe just sits at home all day, doesn't work, and just plays Xbox or whatever the gaming system is now. Maybe has never had a date. Maybe they're in their 30s and never asked a girl out, never even approached a girl. I'm hearing this from my daughters who are in middle school and high school. There's a massive, maybe 60 or 70% of the boys in some of these high schools that have never even approached a girl. They're not even interested. They're not they're not homosexual. They're nothing else. They just aren't inclined. They're just not proactive enough, I guess you could say. Yeah. And so I think as we look all over our life, these various men that we interact, we find that there's different characteristics there. They don't know what they want because they've never shown something that they do want, right? They never did what I did, where I just sort of ran away and figured that this was a good thing, that I'm just going to work towards the opposite of that thing, that lifestyle. And so I started thinking about that, Sarah, and what I came to understand is that we are built in a certain way. We all assume that there's some goodness in us, and that the purpose of the good is the same thing as the purpose of light. The purpose of the good man, the good woman, is the same thing as the purpose of light. The purpose of light is to invade the darkness. The purpose of a good man or a good woman is to invade the evil that they see all around them. And as we look at our world, eventually, if you look hard enough, there's something that just breaks your heart, that just sort of tears you apart. It may be the human trafficking issue. It may be some of these pornography sites where they don't respect kids, and they put stuff on there that they shouldn't put on. There's these things that really tear at you. They're evil things, and sometimes you'll even see evil manifest in these things like the websites and these human smugglers. And there's things like that we each feel that really tear us apart. And that's something that I found can energize us and get us to act. And so we're looking for that spark plug. We're looking for that ignition to get us to move. Now, we may not have a vision of what we want to see happen, but if we can move as men, we can begin to figure out what works, what doesn't work. We can get some movement. We're going to hit some struggles. We're going to hit some pain, but the pain is good when you're trying to burst out of comfort. And my offer for men is this, that I want to rip away the comfort now enslaving your potential. I want to rip away the comfort now enslaving your potential. And my offer for women is, let me have the conversations that you've been trying to have with these young men and that haven't worked out. Because there's something different about love that tries to modify and to get the other person, the beloved, to act a certain way within the ideal of the original lover, right? If I want to try to make my wife in the image and type of woman that I want her to be, that's not a loving act. That's a selfish act. And so we have to figure out a way that we're going to be able to communicate. And again, my offer for women is let me have the conversations, either through a book or through a podcast or through a newsletter, with these young men who you love on your behalf.
I think that's so powerful, because I know in some families, and I will say ours replicates this, is there's been divorce. So you've got some kids who don't have a regular, this is a very judgmental statement, but a stable male figure who says, this is okay, this is not okay. And not by being mean or anything. It's like, that is not moral. That is not okay. And I think as women, we can say those things, but they're interpreted differently because, of course, we're women, right? And I think it's just as important for us to stay clear about what's right and wrong for us as people. Um, but I do think we hear it differently. I definitely would hear it differently if my husband came to me and started thinking, excuse me, what is this conversation about? This is about you. So that's good to know that this book can be that vehicle, or your podcast and your newsletter.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes it's a situation where, like you talked about, men that didn't grow up with a father figure, they're never taught how to properly respect women, right? And so a woman trying to speak into that is not going to be met with a respectful reception. Like there, you may get the courtesy, yeah, I know, but it's not going to really go in because they've never been taught how to do that. And so that's one of the things that we've got to work through. Also, one of the clever things that I found has worked is just to give a man a challenge, give a boy a challenge, right? Failure is actually a very good thing. Failure is a very helpful. It cures a lot of the sort of criminal intent of some of the youth that are misled. To give them some pain and give them some just give them something to struggle over, because pain in the end becomes the pathway to joy. And if we can't get through the pain, we'll never receive the full heightened level of joy that we hope for in our life eventually.
I couldn't agree with you more. And there's a tendency of wanting to remove pain and discomfort and struggle. But when you go back and look, I think all the places where I've become stronger were where someone couldn't, quote unquote, rescue me from my own pain or discomfort or my, quote unquote, failures, right? It's like they just said, hey, okay, there's where you are. What's your next plan, right? What do you want to do? And I think you also get a sense of pride when you figure something out for yourself. You go, okay, I'm capable, right? So then you're a little more brave to go forward and take the next challenge. More of this, less of that type of thing. Am I close?
Oh, absolutely. And there's this thought in the Judeo-Christian worldview that God will never give you a miracle that you could perform by yourself, right? God never does something you could do for yourself. And if you're not going to do something for yourself, and that you could do, and he's not going to do it, well, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I think a lot of us, there's this line from I don't know if you ever remember that old Will Ferrell movie called Ricky Bobby, where he's a race car driver, and great show. And he has this line in there that uh, that nothing, like something to the degree of like nothing that you don't do for yourself, no one will do for you. You've got to take love in order to get love, or something like that. And I think we come to that common fallacy sometimes, but we've got to be able to realize that we never receive without giving first. In fact, that's the way that all investments set up. That's the way that even a tree and it ever sprouts fruit. Right? You have to plant the seed in the ground in order to get it to grow. Investment only happens because there's an investor with capital that doesn't want to lose all their capital to inflation. They give it to an entrepreneur who they trust that grows it. And if they don't give it away, if they don't give the investment away, they lose everything they have to inflation. Just as if you don't plant the seed in the ground, you never get a tree to shade you or to give you fruit. You've got to be able to give something away, and that's got to be painful. We can't really protect ourselves from that pain. We have to really embrace that pain and go after it.
So how do you relate that to men? I mean, that's a very powerful concept. But I mean, in everyday conversation, how would you relate that to a guy or a girl? But I'm just saying guys because that's the focus of your book.
Yeah, I think one of the primary, if I'm speaking conversationally with a guy, I want to have a conversation with him about competency, and that's one of the unusual things, right? Most of the people that are in this space are coming here from an educational or theoretical background that are having these conversations, and I'm coming this from the opposite, from the inverted state where I'm a doer, not a pontificator primarily, and so I want to have these conversations with these young men about competency. What do they hope to do? And a lot of them don't know, they're not really good at anything that's really a marketable skill. And so this is what practice is as well. It's giving away. It's practicing something. Hopefully, knowing that unless you practice something, you're never going to be able to get better at it. And getting better at that is a prerequisite for gaining competency. And if you can pair your competency with integrity, you can begin to be able to build a life. And so these are sort of the building blocks that I like to have that are just sort of higher concepts there And so competency, for instance, if there's a man that knows how to change oil, like go find every single mom that you can find and go offer to change your oil free. Just go do it. Or if you're a programmer, go program for a nonprofit. At some point, someone's going to discover you and do it for free. Do whatever you can for free to help as many people as possible. And the more depressed the person, a widow or an orphan or a single mom, someone like that, the better the situation tends to turn out. It's almost like there's a divine blessing for blessing those who can never repay you. It's almost something like that. And the more that we can do that, the better off we are. But we've got to give in order to get. Lewis says it like this. He says that nothing that you have not given away will ever really be yours. Let me repeat that. So hopefully there's someone that's going to write that down and remember that. This is C.S. Lewis. Nothing that you have not given away will ever really be yours. You never own the tree unless you give the seed away to the ground to die. You never own that competency unless you give away the act as an investment into your future competency. You never really have a life unless you give your life away to others. This is the way that the universe works, and this is the way that men need to build real lives, but we look at ourselves more than we look at others. And as long as you're looking down on other people, you can never see that which is above, and that's a problem.
Okay, that was a bunch you just threw C.S. Lewis into it. Okay, now we're going deep. So when we think about that, and you bring Lewis in, what is the role of faith and fear in shaping a leader's path, would you say?
Yeah, you have to decide whether you allow circumstances in the outer world to control your destiny, or you're going to allow you to control your destiny. It's one or the other. And so I think having the faith to assert that your vision of the future, whether it be the defeat of a manifest evil like we talked about earlier, or your vision of what you want to happen in your life, you want to find love, you want to have family, you want to have a successful career, that those two things are a result of how you think, how you anticipate, how you awaken your mind to the reality of that. And the more that you act like you're already that person, the more those circumstances will comply with your mental order of things. And so that's the first way that we really become, and we could make that step. And if you're not mentally in it, if you don't believe with faith, your reality will not conform to your vision. You'll always find excuses. And the problem with excuses, men hate it when I say this, your excuses are rarely good reasons. In fact, your excuses are rarely reasons at all. They're just excuses. There's excuses. And this is where we find ourselves. And so if we can get past those two things, having a vision of what you do or you don't want, and acting like it's already manifest. And number two, being willing to work towards that. Those are the two critical building blocks we've got to get in order to build and conform a leader out of someone that maybe hasn't really done very much yet.
What happens when someone in the early stages of doing that, right? They have the faith, they've created a vision, they're moving towards it, but they just come up with something that freaks them out. Do they just pick themselves up and go? I mean, because that's just another fear, right? But it might be based in something saying wrong direction. So how do you help people clarify that? Is that a clear question for you to understand?
Yeah. I think as we work through this, we look at things that are controllable and non-controllable. What you fear is highly controllable because you're either going to be the type of person that takes the agency, like you're going to have responsibility for yourself, or you're going to give your agency or responsibility for yourself to other people. If you know, a great way to ruin your life is give away your agency, give away your responsibility to other people, and blame other people for the things that you're thinking you're going through and the actions that you don't take. The steps that you don't take are more important than the steps that you do take, right? If you do take steps, that at least gives you the potential to be able to learn, to be able to push forward. And whenever you fail, you have the opportunity for learning. But if you don't do anything, inaction, that could be your greatest defeat. And I think that's probably one of the epidemics that we're dealing with right now, is that caution, that fearing even. Like people, they don't fear anything. They're fear that they will fear something, and they just know how it's going to end, and so they shut down, don't act. And I think that's one of the issues. So we have to encourage them to find something. And my proposal is the inversion of what classical management theory says: is go find an enemy to defeat, go find a worthy enemy or problem that breaks your heart, and figure out a way to cobble together the competency to go and attack it with everything that you have.
There you go, David and Goliath, right there.
Right.
Talk about an enemy.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, and yeah, there's a great line in his book David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell, where he makes the comment that in life you have the Goliaths that have all the resources, and you have the Davids that have none of the resources. And at some points in history, the reason why David defeats Goliath is because of the lack of resources. It's his imagination overwhelms the weightiness of the resources of the other party. And so there's cases in history, according to him, is that it's the lack of resources that are the big advantage.
Can you see a reason for that?
Yeah. I'll go back and reuse the same comment I used a second ago for the Judeo-Christian world, is that you get divine help when you try to do things you can't do in your own power. When you've got the resources, you're not going to get any divine help. You're not going to get any special revelation. You already have what you need in order to accomplish the action. And your problem is, whenever you've got all the resources, you don't need the divine help, and you're going to get someone that doesn't have anything, and he's got the divine help. Well, you're going to lose every time. And I think that's just an imbalance where the immaterial world is able to conquer the material world, because you have a nature of indestructibility from the Platonic sense that invades the destructive world that's passing away, and it defeats it, whether it's on a historical level or a psychological level or even a philosophical level. The one without the resources defeats the resource a great deal of time whenever there's sort of a divine element here, sticking up for your people, sticking up for the children that you're trying to defend. Any case like that, you get the divine help.
Yeah. Well, and there's a hunger that comes when there's no resource, right? And everything's on the table as an option. You're not so logical that you go, well, that's not how they do it in this way, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, what do we got in front of us? What might work? Let's be open to it. And it's a different mindset, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
So with that, where is comfort a problem?
Comfort is the seeking of pleasure and the avoidance of pain in a way that sacrifices our future for today's stability.
Say that again, because I think that's easy to hear you say. You have a nice speaking voice, but I think it's easy to not hear the nuance of what you said. So say it again.
Okay. That was the first time I've ever said that, so let me see if I can remember what I just articulated.
Just go close.
Okay. Comfort is the avoiding of pain and the seeking of pleasure in a way where you sacrifice your future for the surety of today. It was something like that. It was
Very
something
close.
Like that. Yeah. And so I think the more we dig down and we look either at the psychological impact, whether you go read Frankl from the concentration camps, or you look at it philosophically, or even look at it theologically, the further out you can get into the future, not 1 year, not 5 years, and sometimes we have to live to be able to make it a year. Sometimes we have to live to be able to make it one day. But the further we can look out, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years, 5,000 years, and work towards something out in that distant future, the more we're able to absorb the pain and use it as a training ground. And secondly, the more we're able to look for things that have more durability, right? There's something, I believe that there's something, if you can find something that would exist eternally, that would also have the nature of indestructibility, right? That makes sense, right? Something that would be forever would also be indestructible. And the closer I can get to believing and working towards something and giving my life towards something that's indestructible, whether it be the nature of love, whether it be the nature of justice, whether it be my pursuit of God, it's got to be something that's indestructible by nature. And me giving my finite life for something that's infinite in worth, that's probably a worthy trade-off in my simpleton mind. And so how do we give a vision for something like that? We got to get them looking from a day at a time to week at a time to a month at a time to year at a time, and move them out into the future. And the more we can move into the future, the more pain and discomfort and unease and the awkwardness becomes really padding. It makes you tougher, it makes you stronger. It's like a bodybuilder in the resistance, training for resistance more than you're training for just ease.
Well, and that becomes an anchor too. When you feel adrift, you can go, that's where I'm going. It's okay. I just need to get back on track.
That's right. That's right.
Hopefully the storm's
Absolutely.
not too big. So let's talk about your 9-step framework a bit. Can we?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. But I have a question. What do you think is the most radical step of your 9?
That's a great question. I've not heard that question yet. Um, okay, it's really the first step, and it's something that I've mentioned a second ago. The idea of the people that have never really lived, the theoreticians and the pontificators who have never really lived, they're going to tell you to find a goal, set a goal, work your objectives and your tactics, and set your vision, and organize yourself like that. And I say that's hogwash for a lot of men, that we need to focus on that thing that breaks your heart, that worthy enemy, as I called it, whether it's a person or it's a manifest evil or it's something that just really hurts you. And why do I say that? I make the argument in step 1 that the proper role of the properly directed love is the outright hatred of evil. That they're the same thing. There's this Pauline commandment, I believe, that he writes in a letter to the Romans, where he says, and I don't mean to be talking about religion so much here, but he says, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, and he uses sort of a semicolon there. And those of us that kind of grew up in the public school system, we were always taught to treat the semicolon. You can use it kind of as an equal sign, right? They're kind of balanced statements there. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. So the only way to embrace any evil is by hating. Any way to embrace any good in your life is by hating the evil, and hating evil requires action. It requires action. And so when I realized that the most unholy of men is the nice, weak man who never confronts evil. That's the most unholy man. And then I started seeing it all around me when I studied, George Washington, whose goodness, basically he's been the father of our nation for 250 years already. He basically was only able to threaten people because he had power to threaten, and only a man that can threaten has the ability to be able to love. Only a dangerous man can love dangerously. And so I begin to see that life is really lived in the contrast. That the more you can hate the evil that you see around you, it enables you to love deeper and richer and better in the long run. It's a question about breadth. But the man that only hates others and has no love, that's the kind of man you want to stay away from. That's an evil man. Likewise, the man who says he loves, but he's weak, he never fights for anything, never fights for those he loves, never defends those he loves, plays it safe with his life. That's a man that just wastes his life. And so we got to find the balance in those two things. And Chesterton gives us the balance. He says that in war, we always think that the man is going to war because he hates the people in front of him. It's not because he hates the people in front of him, it's because he's going to war because he loves the people that are behind him, right? There's the same act can be done for two different purposes, right? Either you can hate the one you're going to war to try to kill, or you can love the people that back behind you that are trying to save. And the man or the woman who's willing to defeat the evil they see around him, the injustices that they see around her, is the type of person that's living the life of a higher form of love. And in the end, the 9 steps all get down to the root cause of how we endure, how we become relevant in our life, and that's loving someone more than ourselves.
I just have to take that in. First of all, you don't need to apologize for referencing religion or faith at all, because a lot of our traditions and our knowledge have come from there and from the ancients and the Stoics. I mean, there's just a lot of knowledge. And I think to ignore it is to just cut off our chances of learning from those who have gone before, and most times have some really important things to impart. And as a reader, I'm happy that you throw that in. So, and which takes away the question I was going to ask you about the value of ancient literature and world religions. So, but I want to go back to the 9 again, since I asked you what the most radical one was, the beginning. What are 2 or 3 of the others that you think you would, if you could only offer 3 to people in addition to number 1, what would they be? Where would you say to start? Or are they linear and you have to go from one to the other?
So they do compound. They do compound. Let me give you 2. There's 2 I can think of right off the top of my head. The first one is aim high. That is a common sort of, you hear about this in that kind of the Jordan Peterson space, aim high. But I pair that with something else. I say aiming low is the only sin. Aiming low is the only sin. That whenever you have the option of being the more regal, the more majestic in your actions, the more noble and honorable in your actions, and you choose another path, that is aiming low. And that's the only sin that there is in life. That's the only sin that there is. That's the only mistake that you make. And so I know there's probably a lot of Jews that have 600 rules, 600 commandments. They don't like that. A lot of Christians that have the 10 commandments. They don't like that. But I would submit for your consideration that aiming low is the only sin. And Bruce Lee is actually one of the first people that started talking about that's the only crime is aiming low. Then there's this other step toward the end where I give people a pathway, and this is useful. I speak a lot. I'm a husband, and I have 3 little girls. I don't have any boys in my family. And so as I'm writing this book over 2 years, now keep in mind I've read probably 1,000 books. I've interviewed or had spoken to probably 100 of the most competent people in the world. Like in this room, I've had the Secret Service in this room for 5 days. And so I've had some fairly confident people around. And so I've had.
Oh, they weren't there for you?
They were not there for me. No. They did not come for me. I stayed, they left. Yes. Yeah. And so, but I've had just the blessings, nothing that I did, just circumstances and having the right, great friends who introduced me to the right people. So I had these really interesting conversations. And so what I realized in the end was that there was a pathway where we could make better decisions. And I used like the aiming low is the only sin, that sort of a decision point there earlier, but there's one that's even higher. And it's this, that whenever we have an option between doing the difficult thing and the easy thing is rarely the thing you're supposed to do. In fact, if the easy thing were the right thing to do, you would have already done it. Let me repeat that. If the easy thing were the right thing to do, you would have already done it. And so your delay, your meandering, your comfort-seeking life, that is the one thing that's holding you back. And so whenever we embrace the pain, whenever we embrace the awkwardness, the discomfort, and we reject the thing that we want to do, that's when we know we're on the right path. But the real way, this is looking over years and years and years and even decades of one's life. The right way to think about your life is not about whether it's discomfort, not whether it's meeting your objectives, your goals. The right way to think about life is, and this is the step, seek beauty and you may find truth. So seek beauty and you may find truth. That's the right decision whenever you don't know what you're supposed to do in your life, whether it be a life decision point or some interaction with someone that's close to you. The right thing is to do the more beautiful thing. So what is the beautiful thing? I think that you hear a lot of these philosophers that try to invent, if the world was really supposed to work this way, it would have A, B, and C. Like I'm going to invent my own world and I'm going to tell you and I'm going to tell God how he should have done it, right? They want to invent the world where there's no child suffering, right? But that also type of world is a world where there's no pediatric doctors that are able to heal those children, right? They want to invent a world where there's no such thing as the need for forgiveness. Like, wait, we don't offend each other, so we're not needing to forgive each other. There's no such world where there has to be incarceration and rehabilitation. And so I think the problem with that sort of mindset where we're looking for this world that's perfect, we don't realize that a perfect man is not as perfect. Excuse me. A forgiven man is more perfect than a perfect man never needing to be forgiven. I'll repeat that. A forgiven man is more perfect than a perfect man never needing to be forgiven. Just as a redeemed man is more perfect than a man who never needed to be redeemed. Why is that? It's because the act of healing, the act of forgiving one another, the act of redeeming someone out of from the pathway to hell, of just ruining and wasting their life, that is in itself a beautiful act. And that act of redemption, that act of healing the child who's been sick, the presence of those acts in the world creates a more beautiful world in and of themselves. And so if we can find in ourselves a way to tell the story with our lives where we're able to exhibit a little bit of that sort of beauty, that redemptive beauty, that forgiving beauty, that beauty that takes that banishes the idea that it's going to be an easy life and we're going to look for a difficult life, because out of that difficult life of struggles, there's also many redemptions in there. We can begin to live what I refer to as a beautiful life. And the problem that we forget, the thing that we forget, is that it's not what we think about our own lives. It's not our own internal decisions on how we view our lives. It's the stories that our kids and our grandkids and our great nephews and nieces and they want to tell about us. And for men, I don't know if this is true of women, but I imagine this is true that women want this to be true of men, that if you're a man, no one's going to remember you unless you heightened a love or defeated a worthy enemy. You defeated an evil. Either you heightened a love or you defeated an evil. Those are the only two pathways to living a relevant life for a man. And we've got to figure out which of those two things we want to do. But those two things also happen to be the two things in your life that bring beauty, bring beauty. So in the end, the way your pathway that you live a true life, a life that's directed towards truth, is you look for the opportunities to bring in more beauty, not only to your own story, but then to the story of others, a story worth your kids, your grandkids, and even your great grandkids telling one day. And that's also, by the way, how you get relevance.
Thank you for that. I really love that explanation. And I can picture, as you're talking about the things I remember about men in my life who are now gone, but it's those moments, right, that stood out to me where they did something, not necessarily by world standards so crazy great, but like for a kid, crazy great, right?
Yeah.
Beautiful, simple, not hard to do, but it took something of them to give to me in this case, but to others as well. And so I thought that was a really great distinction that you make there. And okay, now, but this is an odd question. But when Bruce Lee says never aim low, is that really about where to point a punch, or is that an aspirational low?
I've never thought about that.
Well,
I think he's got a book called Striking Thoughts, I think is what it is, or
okay.
Striking Points, something like that. I'll go research into that.
Let me know. I'm going, well, that could have a couple of different meanings from Bruce Lee, and he's been around long enough to have some wisdom to share. I'm going to check that out, actually, as a fan of Bruce Lee. So your book's coming out July 5th, right? Is that still your date?
That's correct. July 5th, paperback, hardback, Kindle ebook. The hardback and the ebook are already ready for pre-order. And I'm trying to get the audiobook ready for July 5th as well. So just dealing with some back and forth with the big companies who don't have hearts.
Well, that can take some. Are you the narrator?
I am.
Nice.
I
That'll
am.
be
Yes.
great. I'm a huge audio fan. I probably burn through 5 or 6 books a week. A lot of them are just fluff books, but then like even the knowledge books, and then I buy the hard copy too, because I'm going, okay, now I have to look to what I just heard. But man, I've read so many more books.
That's right. Yeah, that's a huge hack. And I remember back in the early 90s getting those Zig Ziglar tapes and getting all those little cassette tapes and the DVDs when they brought the DVDs in the car. That was a real game changer for a lot of us.
It was. And I still will listen. Like someone will have music on in the car. I'm thinking, oh, so boring. I've heard that song for decades. So I'll put something different on and listen to a book. The trick is to have one ear free so you're not totally zoned out on anybody else. But I love audiobooks. So I'll be excited when you get that there. And I can tell just by your voice and your enthusiasm that it'll be a good listen. So
Yes. Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
nice. Rick, I want to ask you to take us out by sharing. You've already shared a lot of parting words of wisdom. So just a final thought that you think we should take away from this episode or an encouragement.
I think there's a lot of people out there, whether it's a woman or a man, who feel like sort of life is hopeless. They're sort of depressed. They're looking for something. Nothing's ever really available to give them enjoyment, and they're just sort of looking around there. And so, I would say that hopefully after the last half hour or so with Sarah and I speaking, I think that you should be pretty convinced that we have some hope. That we have some hope. And I can tell you that just for me speaking personally, that I have hope. I think hope is possible for anyone. Now, I think that also, like I talked about when I first started speaking, was that the purpose of light is to invade the darkness. The purpose of the good man is to invade the evil. But also, there's something really intrinsic about the idea of hope, that if a drop of hope exists somewhere, it threatens all threats everywhere. Like, I'm going to repeat that again, because I really believe there's someone that needs to write that down. If a drop of hope exists somewhere, it threatens all threats everywhere. So let my hope for you invade your life right now. Let my hope for you invade your life. I have a drop of hope. You should be entirely convinced that I've got a drop of hope, that I'm optimistic that something can happen, something can change in your life and the people around you. Let my drop of hope invade your reality, and let that invasion unthreaten all the threats that you see around you, whether it be comfort, whether it be despotism, whether they be disorders. Let my hope threaten everything that's threatening your life right now, and take heart, because there's someone in Texas, there's someone in Nevada that believes that you can emerge and you will emerge out of this, because our hope is now threatening your hopelessness.
Okay, No Labels, No Limits podcast listeners. What a great interview and conversation with Rick. I so appreciate you being on the show. And I'm going to invite our listeners, once you've heard this, before you turn off and go to the next episode, send this to someone you know who might be feeling a little down and need to know about that drop of hope, because we all do at different times. We're all in a place where we just need to be reminded of that. And I think Rick's the guy to do it. And then pay attention, go out, you can pre-order his book now, rate and review this episode, and please, please, please share it, because it's powerful and we want to get the word out as far as we can. And thanks, and I'll see you for another episode next week.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic business coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. Please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Till next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.